we wouldn't, he does it all, and I think we need to give him a round of applause. I am honored to present Judy Finnessy tonight. She and her husband Jim, who is manning the electronics over there, we got to meet with them and have a bite to eat before they came over, and it's just been such a pleasure to get introduced to them. And we agreed as they hurried out the door that we can't wait for heaven when we aren't limited by time constraints, where we can hear each other's stories. And you know, and when God can tell us our own backstories as well, all those things that He did behind the scenes to make us make things happen the way they needed to and the timing that they needed to. So don't you all look forward to that along with me. Judy earned her bachelor's in psychology and accounting, and therefore she went into a career for 40 years in IT architecture and project management at John Deere. Strange twists aren't there. She's retired. She's devoted herself to studying creation apologetics, and especially its impact on the faith of our children. She calls herself a grandma grizzly because she teaches children how to defend their faith. She's a certified biblical creation ministry professional, say that's twice, and teaches week-long creation training for teachers, facilitates small group studies of Genesis 1 through 11, and teaches adult Bible studies and more. In her free time, she is involved with Lutherans for Life. She loves Christian music. She's a music director and pianist for the Tin Cup Community Chapel up in the mountains in the summer months, and does fundraising for Love, Inc. Inc. in this case stands for In the Name of Christ, and it's a parachurch organization in Wilton that pulls together churches to do the work, to be the hands and feet of the church. Judy is going to be speaking tonight on critical thinking skills, a topic I know we'll all benefit from. Please help me welcome her.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just really excited to be here with you, and I thank Paul for inviting me tonight. This is one of my favorite topics because it's so practical. It gives you a lot of skills that you can use. And you don't have to remember a lot of facts. You do have to remember a few things, but it's not very much. How many of you have ever gone out and wanted to talk to somebody about creation, but you just felt that maybe you don't have all the answers and you're afraid maybe they're going to ask you a question that you won't be able to answer and then you'll be embarrassed? Has anybody ever felt that way? Yeah, I sure did when I started, and sometimes I still do, but these skills have helped me an awful lot. And this talk, as I said, is one of my favorites. And there's so much information in this talk, I'm going to have to talk fast. And I'm actually going to use both sides of my mouth. Well, let's get going here. I want to arm you so that when you face an evolutionist, you know how to respond and you have confidence in your answer. So we're going to start out with what they're teaching in public schools today. Evolution is being taught as if it's a fact, isn't it? Let's take a look here. Today, nearly all biologists acknowledge that evolution is a fact. That's our first quote. That's from a biology textbook. And here's the National Academy of Sciences. Is evolution a theory or a fact? It is both. So in our public school systems, in our culture today, everybody treats evolution as if it's a fact. So it's no wonder that students are losing the battle against the evolutionist propaganda. So tonight we're going to dismantle all that. We need to arm our children with the information that they need and the techniques that they need to combat this indoctrination. And we want them to come out of schools winning the battle so that they can become evangelists, not brainwashed into believing evolution. Okay, so we've got to make some changes here. We're going to face this Goliath that's challenging us. So there's some common evolutionary tactics. The first one is know that creation is a fact. And the second one, over millions of years. Now that is the biggest bluff ever. When someone says millions of years, what they really mean is they don't have any evidence that can prove what they're saying, okay? So I want you, every time you hear millions of years, to think no evidence, okay? Now, one thing I want to make clear before we go any further is that I'm not here to blame public school teachers. Okay, public school teachers have their jobs on the line, their hands are tied. They need to teach what the government mandates they teach, and we have many, many wonderful teachers in the public school system. So what I say tonight reflects on the system, not on the individual teachers in the system, okay? So one of the things our educational systems do is they don't allow any opposition, so there's no discussion about whether evolution is true or not. And they only allow evolution answers on tests. So if you want to get a grade, you've got to give them the evolution answer, right? So they use intimidation also. They try to discredit the Bible and creation. They want to discredit anyone who does not believe in evolution. And they want to establish an illusion of authority or facts. And that's because there really aren't any facts behind what they're saying. So they've got to establish that illusion that there are facts. So that's how it's done. And we need to be able to counter this. We need to be able to help our youth. So we're going to use critical thinking skills in order to do that. So the critical thinking method is a bit different than just presenting evidence, okay? Usually that's our first reaction is we want to present evidence to counter what the evolutionists are saying, right? But what do you have to know in order to do that? You got to know a lot of science. You got to know a lot of theology. What I want to teach you tonight is how you can do that without knowing a lot of science and without knowing a lot of theology. So critical thinking, what we do is we focus on analyzing the statement, the words used in the statement. What do they mean? How are they being used? And then we're going to make the evolutionists accountable for what they're saying. We're going to hold them accountable for their statements and make them come up with the evidence that they have behind those statements. So you don't need to know a lot of science. And by the way, this technique also works very well in debates. And usually evolutionists, they're very arrogant, tend to be anyway, not all of them, but a lot of them are. And they're intent on discrediting you and attacking the Bible. So they're going to ask lots of questions. But if you use this technique, most of the time you don't even have to answer their questions, okay? So, yes, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. You know, I've read a little bit about the Bible, and there's long ages in there, people living 900 years. Do you really believe that?
Yes, don't you?
No.
Why not?
Well, because it's never been observed.
Well, do you believe that life evolved from natural causes?
Yes.
Why? Has it ever been observed?
No.
No, it's never been observed. So what did I just do? I just got him to see the contradiction in what he's saying, right? He said he didn't believe that people could live to be 900 years old because it had never been observed. But he says he believes that life evolved with from natural causes, but that's never been observed either. So what he was expecting me to do was to give him a technical answer on how people could live 900 years. But what did I really do? I put him on the defensive, didn't I? I started asking him questions. All right, that's what we want to do, right? And we want to keep the evolutionist on the defensive so that we don't have to answer their questions unless they answer ours first, right? So now I know there's a whole bunch of you guys sitting out there thinking, boy, am I glad I'm not married to her, right? So I don't want to have to answer her questions. Okay, so let's talk about some questions that we can ask. And Paul, I want you to get ready to lock the doors because nobody gets to leave until they've got these questions memorized, okay? So make sure you can memorize these questions. All right, the first question is, how do you know it's true? And the reason for this question is in answering this question, they have to give you their source. Where did they get this information from, right? And it's usually either a professor or it's from the internet. If it's from the internet, you can discredit it pretty quickly, can't you? So they usually haven't done any research on their own. The second question is, has it ever been observed? Has anybody observed the Big Bang? Is anybody there to see it? No. Has anybody ever observed a galaxy forming? No. How about a star? No. How about one form of life evolving into another form of life? Did anybody ever witness that? No. Okay. And how about millions of years? Any witnesses there? No. So you see what you can do here? If you're looking for observational evidence, you can discredit the evolutionists every time because they have no observational evidence of evolution. Okay, let's move on. Question number 3. Are you making any assumptions? All of evolution is based on assumptions. So this is where we want to attack them, where they're making assumptions. You can learn to take a look at the wording and stuff, and you'll know when they're making an assumption, right? So I'm going to need 3 volunteers. Somebody help me out here? Okay, we've got a volunteer back there. So every time I say number 1, I want you to say, how do you know it's true? Okay? Can you do that? Okay, another volunteer. Who wants to volunteer? Be careful you don't move. I might pick you. Go ahead, Keith. So I want you to take question number 2. Has it ever been observed? Okay, so anytime I say 2, I want you to say, has it ever been observed? Okay, who's my 3rd volunteer?
Yeah, over there.
Over there?
Over, look in the room.
Oh, there we go. Hi. Okay, so I would like you to take question number 3. And anytime I say 3, I want you to say, are you making any assumptions? Okay, can you do that? Okay, who can tell me all 3 questions? You can do this. Go ahead.
How do you know it's true? Has it ever been observed? And are you making any assumptions?
Okay, so all of you assumed that you couldn't look at the screen, didn't you? Did I say that? No, you can look at the screen. But see how easy it is to make an assumption? So we need to guard against that, and we need to look for the evolutionist assumptions. Okay, so let's do the volunteers again. Number 1.
How do you know it's true?
Number 2.
Has it ever been observed?
And number 3.
Are you making any assumptions?
Very good. We're going to have at least 3 people that know one of those questions before they leave here tonight, right? So, okay. So what have we actually observed that if we haven't observed galaxies forming or life evolving or even, what have we observed? Well, we've observed that mice produce mice, that elephants produce elephants, that bacteria produce bacteria, right? So what does that sound like? Sounds like the Bible, doesn't it? Created within their kind. Okay. Let's move on to some examples here. We're going to apply these critical thinking questions. So here's an evolutionist statement. Life originated in a pool of chemicals about 3.7 billion years ago. Number 1.
How do you know it's true?
Okay. How do they know that's true? Was anybody there? No. Okay, number 2.
Has it ever been observed?
Did anybody observe that? Nobody was around that long ago, were they? No idea. And are they making any assumptions? Well, I'm sorry, number 3. Number 3, question? Number your question? Are you making any assumptions? You got it. So they're making a lot of assumptions here. So it's never been observed, it's never repeated. You know, one of the things about a scientific theory or a fact is that it has to be observable and repeatable. ribosomes. Anybody get excited when I said all those words? You always have a fear that day, though. So, let's go to the next statement. Scientists do know that about 200 to 300 million years after the Earth cooled enough to carry liquid water, cells similar to modern bacteria were common. This is from a textbook that's very widely used, biology textbook from Miller and Levin. So, number one.
How do you know it's true?
Okay, how do you know it's true? Was anybody around again? It was 200 to 300 million years ago. Was anybody around? No. Number two.
Has it ever been observed?
Anybody observe that? No. Number three.
Are you making any
Are you
assumptions?
making any assumptions? They're making all kinds of assumptions here. The whole evolutionary model is based on assumptions. Are we kind of starting to see that now? Sorry, I'm trying to coordinate about 2 or 3 things here, so every once in a while I can slow down a bit. So, again, we have 3 questions. Let's just repeat them for review. Number 1. Good. Now I'm going to ask Dave if he would just blank out the screen, and we're going to try and about the screen. We're going to see if you guys get to go home tonight or not. Okay, thanks, Dave. All right, what are the 3 questions? Great. I think you guys are all going to get to go home tonight. That's great. Okay, Dave, you can put it back on. Thank you. Okay. So now we're ready for our power question. What's our power question? Well, show me any observational evidence for evolution that does not require me to use faith. Okay, what are the 2 key words in there? Observational, that's key, right? Because they've got all kinds of not observational stuff that they use. And the other one is faith. We want to put the evolutionists in a position where they need to admit that what they believe about evolution is also faith. They have no real facts. Okay, so here's one that we're going to try using the power question. And I need one more volunteer. Would somebody volunteer to remember those 2 words for me, observational and faith? Can we get a volunteer for that? Okay, thank you. So here's, atheists love to try to stump us, and this is one of the areas where we usually get attacked. Life must be on other planets. It's arrogant to believe we're the only life in the universe. I mean, this universe is so big, how can you possibly think that you're the only life in this universe, right? So what's the question we're going to ask? First of all, what are the 2 key words? Where's my key?
Observational and faith.
Okay, so we're going to ask this question. Show me any observational evidence for life on other planets that does not require me to use faith. Okay? Do they have any? No, they don't. We can't even find observational evidence for life in some of our cities, especially Washington, D.C., right? It's questionable. Okay. Here's another one. This is another place where we can use the power question. Over millions of years, mutations added new genetic information allowing for the diversity of life as we see it today. Okay. Let's have the 2 keywords again.
Observational and faith.
Okay, so let's formulate a question here. Show me the observational evidence for where the vast amount of information in our DNA, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble reading this, that does not come without having to use faith. Okay? So can they do that? Can they explain that? They're going to go back to millions of years, aren't they? Because over millions of years, anything can happen. So anytime they don't have evidence, it's over millions of years. So if we're going to be able to call it a fact or a theory, they have to be able to produce the observable evidence. Great claims require great evidence. And just to be on, also, this is not critical thinking skills, but just so you know, information cannot be added to DNA. Okay, so that's a false statement in the first place. Okay, this is school, right? We're gonna have a pop quiz. All right. Show me any, everybody do it, this is not just the volunteers. Show me any
Observational evidence.
no evidence for evolution that does not require me to use
Faith.
Okay, and what are our three questions here? First one is, okay, I gave you that one. What's the second one? Okay, and what's the third one? Making any assumptions? Okay, you guys all get to go home tonight. You're doing a great job. Okay, so now we've got the three questions and we've got the power question. There's another thing we need to look at, and that's that words have meaning. So there's such things as fuzzy words and magic words and red flag words that we're going to learn to pick out. We're going to learn how to read between the lines and how to recognize when they're bluffing, okay? And how to demand the observational evidence. So I'm going to show you some fuzzy words. Here's some fuzzy words. We believe, we think, it must have, could have, might have, our opinion is, we guess, and over millions of years. So they're trying to describe what happened, but they're trying to do it without any observable evidence, right? So that's why we call them fuzzy. They're trying to keep you thinking that they've got something, they've got facts that they don't have. Let's do an example. Okay, this is from Life Science Apprentice Hall. So this is also a textbook for grade 7. Paleontologists, let me put it up here. Paleontologists think that Archaeopteryx and today's birds descended from some kind of reptile, possibly from a dinosaur. Okay, can we pick out the fuzzy words now? What do you think the first one is? Think that. And what's the next one? What's the next fuzzy word? What's that? Some kind of. Yes. They don't even know what kind of reptile, do they? So they just say some kind of reptile. They can't describe it. And then the most scientific word of all, and what is that? Possibly. Yes. So what do they really know here? Nothing at all, do they? They didn't know anything. But they're just bluffing. And if you start reading newspapers, you'll find these words all over the articles in the newspapers too. Did anybody see the recent article on life on Venus? You'll find these kind of things all over that article, right? Take a look at it and see. I was going to try to get it ready for tonight, but I just didn't have enough time to do it. But take a look at that article and you'll see it. Okay, here's another one. And this is USA Today, November 5th, 2013. A discovery out of this world, Earth-like planets. There are likely tens of billions of Earth-like planets in our Milky Way galaxy. In fact, the nearest Earth-like planet may be only 12 light years away. And with a universe of hundreds of billions of galaxies, our entire universe must contain billions of Earth-like planets. Okay, let's pick out the fuzzy words here. What's the first one? Very likely. What's the next one? This is kind of a combination. It's in fact, combined with maybe. So they're trying to give us the illusion of fact, but then they turn right around and say maybe, right? And must contain is the last one. So since they don't know if it does, they just say, well, it must contain. And we're bluffed into believing that it must contain, right? Here's another one. This is Joseph Silk, who has his PhD in astronomy, and is writing about the Big Bang. And he says, imagine that infinitesimal fluctuations in density were present in the early universe. The expansion of the universe must have exerted stabilizing influence on such irregularities. The expanding universe has the effect of greatly impeding what otherwise might have been catastrophic forces. Nevertheless, the process of growth of fluctuations went on for a very long time. Do any of you have an idea what he just said here? Does anybody understand it? No. So let's kind of take that apart. What's that very first word there? Imagine. Does that tell you how you should treat this paragraph? It does, doesn't it? It's a fairy tale, okay? Must have. Okay, we just saw that, and it means they had no facts. Might have been. Now they're not even sure, right? And went on for a very long time. So must have tells you he doesn't know, he doesn't have any observational evidence. Might have been. Now he's not even sure. And went on for a very long time. How does he know that? No one's ever observed a galaxy form. And you'd say, wait a minute. The textbooks tell us how a star forms, right? You get this big nebula gas, and it starts circulating, and gravity causes it to shrink, and pretty soon a star forms, right? Isn't that what the textbooks tell us? I think so. But what they don't tell you, it's not what you will not find in a textbook, is what happens when it starts to shrink. Does anybody know we got any engineers here? You start getting heat energy, don't you? And because of the experiments we've done in the labs, we know that any time it gets to a certain point, that heat energy overcomes the gravitational force and it expands back out. So scientists actually have no idea how a star forms. Okay, and if you get an honest scientist, they will tell you that. But it's not in our textbooks. And there's a technical term for how a star forms. Do you know what it is? Baloney! Okay? So you see what our students are up against, right? They're up against evolution called science, right? And they're usually not given a chance to disagree. Okay, now I want to show you the king of fuzzy spaces. Does anybody know who Richard Dawkins is? Yeah. He's the high priest of evolution, isn't he? And he goes around openly criticizing Christians. But take a look at what he says here. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved, probably by some kind of Darwinian means, probably to a very high level of technology, and designed a form of life that they seeded into perhaps this planet. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature from some sort of designer. There are more fuzzy words in this paragraph than
You
there
think
are
somebody
words.
like Richard Dawkins would know something better to write something like that?
You think so, wouldn't you? This is from the movie Expelled. Did anybody see that movie? It's a good movie if you ever get a chance to watch it. So what do we know about this statement? We know there's absolutely nothing that's verifiable in that statement. It's all make-believe, and we can just basically disregard it. Okay, so there's another form. Oh, I guess I did go through these. Let's go through it. Let's catch all the words. Could be at some earlier time, probably,
Some kind of,
perhaps this planet, right? And I suppose it's possible. Okay, let's move on to magic words. Here's some magic words. Appeared, emerged, arose, gave rise to, was on the way to becoming, burst onto the scene, evolved itself, and was making a transition to. So what are they trying to do here? They're trying to describe a process, how a process occurred, that they don't really have any facts about, right? So they use these magic words. So, for example, they talk about fish turning into land animals, right, coming out of the ocean. They could say, this creature magically appeared, all right? Or this creature emerged from the ocean. You know, things like that. So let's take some examples of magic words, and this is not abracadabra, okay? So evo-devo, or evolutionary development, that's what that stands for. I'm sorry. Okay. Evo-devo, or evolutionary development, proposes that genes involved in cobbling together flesh and bone during the early growth were repurposed to develop new structures throughout evolution's history by combining their functions in new ways. What's the magic word here? Does anybody recognize it? It's repurposed. Okay, I want to give you guys a little assignment. Again, we're doing school tonight, right? So I want you guys to go home tonight, and I want you to repurpose yourself into another creature. How are you going to do that, right? It's just a magic word because they don't understand the process, they don't know anything about it, they don't have any facts, so they put in a magic word. Here's another example. In order to survive, living things have evolved sensory systems that are adapted to their specific environments and needs. In addition to seeing, hearing, touching, and smelling, organisms have evolved a fascinating range of ways to sense their environment. Some create pictures with sound, others detect heat or navigate with electricity. So they're talking about sensory systems. Sensory systems are very complicated. Let's just take, for example, where did eyes come from? Did they start out with these little light-seeking things? Even that's pretty complicated, isn't it? Did you know that if your eyes were to have evolved, that there would have to have been at least 7 things that evolved precisely at the same time in order for you to actually see? Evolution is really impossible. Let's take the organisms that have evolved. How'd that happen? There's no explanation yet, is there? We're supposed to just take it on trust, right? Happened over millions of years, trust me, it happened. And some create pictures with sound. Has anybody here ever tried to create a picture with sound? It's a very complex operation, isn't it? So this is all magic. Everything in this statement is magic. We have 2 parts of the statement here that are magic. Let's go on to another one here. Around 230 million years ago, during the Triassic period, a new type of reptile emerged on the scene. Dinosaurs would rule the land for 180 million years. So a new type of reptile emerged. How'd that happen? There's that magic word again, emerged. There's no explanation here other than bluffing. And there's that millions of years again, right? Saying, we don't have any facts, so we're just telling you it happened over millions of years. Okay, just so you don't forget, let's review our questions again. Number 1. How do you know it's true? Nobody knows it's true, right? Because nobody was there 230 million years ago. Number 2. Has it ever been observed? No, it hasn't, because nobody was around. And and number 3. Have they made any assumptions? They have made a lot of assumptions. So at this point, can you really call evolution a fact at all? Not at all, can you? Can you even call it a theory? You really even can't call it a scientific theory, because a scientific theory, there are lots of definitions of theory, Bill Robinson? Anybody remember Lost in Space? Okay, so red flag words are common words, and they're used in everyday communication. They're either sweeping generalities or maybe they're personal opinions. And they're generally used to intimidate someone, okay? So let's take a look at a list of red flag words. All, everybody. No real scientist would say that. Are you kidding me? Those express an absolute when they don't really know, right? And then we have I believe, I think, or truth. Those express a personal idea. Your truth, my truth. I believe, I think. This is my personal opinion. It's not something that's true or false. And then the last two, fundamentalist or intolerant. That's a reference to being closed-minded. So then we can answer that with, why are you intolerant of my intolerance, right? A disagreement is really the foundation of true tolerance, right? Disagreement can bring the truth into focus. So it's used for intimidation, but we shouldn't be intimidated. We need to call them out for being intolerant. So we have another big challenge that we can meet with critical thinking skills. We're told in the school systems that evolution is a fact, and we're told that the fossil record actually proves that evolution is true. Now nothing could be farther from the truth, and I'm going to challenge them in that. I'm going to show you an easy way to challenge the fossil record, and you don't even have to look at any fossils. We don't have to examine any fossils, okay? Because who wants to look at things, right? Okay. So the fossil record proves evolution is true or false, and we're going to dig into that. There are several items here that we're going to look at. We're going to have another critical thinking question. So I'm going to need a volunteer to be thinking about whether you're volunteering. We're going to talk about deception in textbooks when it comes to fossils. This question is only going to pertain to fossils, so keep that in mind. We're going to talk about living fossils. We're going to talk about the Cambrian explosion, and that's not like an explosion of dynamite or anything like that. We're going to talk about something called fossil graveyards, and then we're going to finish up with dinosaurs. Okay? So what are our three critical thinking questions again? One, how do you know it's true? Two, has it ever been observed? And three, are you making any assumptions? Good. Now we have one more to add. This is just for fossils. How much the fossil was actually found and how much was thrown in by an artist. So not only do we have deception in words, but we can have deception in pictures too, can't we? Okay, let's take a look at this first example. For instance, modern whales are the descendants of four-legged land animals. So what are they teaching about whales? They're saying that, okay, initially we came out of the ocean, right? And we became land animals. And then for some reason, one of these land animals decided it didn't want to live on land anymore and went back into the ocean and became a whale, right? That's what they're expecting us to believe. All right, let's take a look here at the pictures. Okay? What's our question? Does anybody remember? How much of the animal is real? How much is actual bones? And how much is an artist's conception? Okay, if you look at those four pictures up there, which are supposed to represent the transitional forms between the land animal and the whale that it's supposedly evolved into, how much of that do you think they've actually found? I'm going to say it in two languages so you really get it. 0, nada. And that's all the Spanish I know. So what question would you ask about what they're showing in the textbook? You'd ask that question. How much was actually there and how much was the artist's conception? So this one was entirely drawn by artists. They didn't find any of them as fossils. So this isn't science at all. It's actually purposeful deception, isn't it? They're trying to mislead in this case. So here's Science Magazine. And they've got a picture of this Papacetus. That's supposed to be the transitional form. And they didn't even say that it was an artist's conception. Not only do they have the bones here, but they've got the flesh. They know what color it was. They've got its legs drawn in and everything. It's developing legs. Now, can I show you how much evidence they found to make that picture? Let me show you. See the gray parts of the skull? That's how much they found. And that's what they used to draw this picture in the front of the Science Magazine. Here, a few years later, they found the actual bones for this animal. They found the rest of the skeleton. And up on the left, you can see what the bones look like. And so then they recreated a picture of that animal. It was actually a wolf-like land animal with legs capable of running. But did anybody ever say that it wasn't a whale ancestor? No, and they never told us that in the textbooks. The whole thing was a big misrepresentation. Okay, let's talk about Nebraska man. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about anthropology, right? Anybody know what anthro means? You were going to say man, right? Yeah. It means man, right? And what does ology mean? Anybody know that? Study it. So it's a study of the man. So I'm going to ask you guys all an anthropological question tonight. And you know what? I know you're going to get the answer because anthropology is not that hard. So here comes the anthropology question. Ready? Where did they find Nebraska man? In Nebraska. Very good. I knew somebody would get that. So it's found in
I knew that, but I just couldn't remember the answer.
Is anybody here from Nebraska? Okay. Okay, so it's found in the 1920s. And they had so much evidence. Look at these pictures. And look at the title. Nebraska's 8 men of the Western world. They had so much evidence. They actually drew Nebraska man. They drew his family. They drew his environment. And they put these pictures in the textbook. So, what's our question? How much of the fossil was really found, and how much was the artist's conception, right? Here's what was actually found. It was a tooth. And you know, when they examined it, when they really examined it, they found out it wasn't a human tooth. It wasn't an ape tooth. It was a pig's tooth. Okay? So this is the first time that a pig ever made a monkey out of a man. Right? Okay. Let's go on and do another example. This is Piltdown Man, and look at these headlines. It says, Darwin's theory is proved true. And I say I'm having trouble reading the print here. English scientists say that the skull found in Sussex establishes human descent from apes. And it's actually thought to be a woman, so women are the women, right? So look at that headline. A Piltdown man was used as an example of evolution in our textbooks for over 40 years, right? And finally, somebody decided, let's go look at the bones. And here's what they found.
Wow. And that's amazing.
Yeah, and so what they actually had of the skull, they looked at it, they had a piece of a human skull, and then they had the jawbone of an ape and some teeth. And what they found when they examined it is that the whole thing was actually a forgery. Somebody had gotten part of the human skull and the jawbone of the ape, and they had chemically stained them to make them look old, and then they filed down the teeth to make them fit in the jaw. So the whole thing was a fraud. But it lasted in the public education system for over 40 years. Okay, as an example of evolution. Now here's some more recent, excuse me, here's a more recent example. This is Archaeoraptor, and this is National Geographic. You gotta really watch National Geographic. And also the Discovery Channel. National Geographic has had a lot of retractions, and they put the article out there in big bold print, and then when they print the retraction, they print it about this big, so you can hardly read it. Okay. But this was supposed to be a feathered dinosaur, and proof that dinosaurs evolved into birds. This is what they're actually teaching in school. Did you know they're even teaching now that T-Rex is a cousin of the chicken? Pretty wild, isn't it? So again, here you have color pictures of this famous fossil in Archaeoraptor. So let's look at what they really had, what happened here. Look at this headline. The dinosaur bird smashed in the fossil clay. Okay, two things went wrong. One, they brought the bones from China. They took them out of China, so there's a big problem already. And then they discovered that feather imprints had been pasted on the fossil. And this was the main thing that made them think that this was a dinosaur that had turned into a bird. They'd been pasted on it. So again, what do we see here? This is evolution. Evolution is not science, is it? One more. This is called fossil imagination. Scientists discovered in 1983, this was discovered this, 95% intact, and they dated it to 47 million years old. And here's the newspaper headline. Fossil item, extraordinary find, is the missing link in human evolution. Meet your ancestor, right? Okay, so what happened to that? So 100 days after the great announcement, it was revealed to be another wonder. It was actually an extinct lemur. So it just goes to show if you believe in evolution, your imagination sees evolution, doesn't it? Okay. Again, since we're simulating school tonight, we're going to take a little quiz here. Right? And again, Paul lock the doors. If they don't get 100%, you can't leave, okay? Got that? Okay. So let's look at this first example. On the left, you see a fossil of a turtle. On the right, you see a living turtle. So what does the fossil turtle look like? It's like the living turtle, doesn't it? Is it any surprise to anybody here that turtles have always looked like turtles? Right? How about fossil spiders? This is fossil spiders. Do they look like spiders? And here's a starfish, a fossil of a starfish compared to a living starfish. Now this thing is supposed to be 400 million years old, and it couldn't even develop legs to walk back into the ocean. Right? Bats. What do bats look like? Fossilized bats look like bats, don't they? And the same thing with crabs. Okay, now be careful. This is the trick one. What does the fossilized shrimp look like? Still looks like cocktail, doesn't it? How about dragonflies? Is there any difference there? And horseshoe crab? No difference, right? The seahorse? The frogs? Still look like frogs. Okay, how many did you get right? Did you all get 100%? All right, so we can unlock the doors there. There are many more examples of this. Here's alligators, supposed to be 100 million years old. There's no change. The alligators still look like alligators. Now, I'm putting up the evolutionist ages here, but we don't believe those long ages, do we? There's plenty of evidence to support the Bible when it says that the earth is young, right? And one of the big things that scientists evolutionists say supports an old Earth is radiometric dating. Well, radiometric dating is based on a number of assumptions, and we need to question those assumptions, but there's really nothing that radiometric dating can tell us about the age of the Earth. And sometimes they say carbon dating, but carbon dating is a very good indicator of a young Earth, actually. Carbon-14 does not support in any way old Earth. It's powerful evidence of a young Earth. Here's a coelacanth, and this creature is kind of unique. It supposedly lived 100 million years ago, and that's when they found this fossil. And they thought it went extinct about 70 million years ago. And then, guess what? In the 1900s, they found living coelacanths. Okay, this was a problem, because what they were teaching in schools, based on fossil evidence, was that this creature was growing legs. And it was probably one of the creatures that became an amphibian and walked out of the ocean. But guess what? When they found the living coelacanths, no legs, all right? So over 100 million years, the coelacanth had no legs. And then there's the Tortuga lizard. They like to use these lizards in dinosaur movies because they kind of look like a dinosaur, so they paint them up and use them in dinosaur movies. But here again, this is supposed to be 200 million years old, and this small lizard lives in New Zealand. It hasn't changed in 200 million years. There's scorpions, no change in 300 million years, and jellyfish, no change in over 500 million years. So if evolution is true, we should see some changes, shouldn't we? We should see some transitions. And we should find those in the fossil record. Anybody ever seen this one? A gator bird? That's what they say, right? Reptiles changed into birds. No evidence. Here's a bunny cat. How about that one? You found one of those? Nope. How about the rhino mammal? Okay, this is what you do on your computer when you don't have anything to do. How about a bird dog? Does that look like a bird dog? A sparrow box. And here's an improved polar bear. I think it probably falls down a lot. Here's one that we've actually found, and it exists in churches today, right? What is it? Wolf in sheep's clothing, isn't it? And here's a cat shell. Don't go in the water. And here's basically a mother dog. Okay, so on to our next topic, memory explosion. Like I said, this is not a memory explosion, okay? So I want you to focus, this is actually, the picture on the left is a picture that's really common in a lot of our textbooks. It's called the geological sequence, right? Or the geological column, sometimes it's referred to as that. So I want you to look at the bottom two layers. They're called Precambrian and Cambrian. And why is that significant? Well, in the Precambrian layer, all that we see are fossils that are single-celled fossils, basically. And then if we go to the Cambrian period, we all of a sudden find complex creatures. We find seashells, we find trilobites, sometimes even some fish are found in the Cambrian layer. And by the way, this whole thing it's just a picture in a textbook, right? The fossil record actually has nothing to do with this geological column. It doesn't prove this geological column at all. Okay, so back to those two bottom layers. If evolution were true, shouldn't we see different kinds of transitional animals between these two layers? So instead of going directly from a single-celled animal to a fish, which is really complex, that would take thousands and thousands of steps, right? We should see from a one-celled animal, we should see 5-celled animal, 10-celled animal, 100-celled, 1,000-celled animal, before we ever even get close to fish. So the significance a single one. And so the Cambrian explosion is a very good tool for defeating evolution. This just defeats it right at the bottom of the evolutionary scale, doesn't it? There are so many scientists who back up this claim that there are none of these transitional fossils, and that the Cambrian explosion pretty much is a death knell for evolution. This is Jonathan Sarfati. Have you ever heard of Jonathan Sarfati? He's a scientist who works with Creation Ministries International, and this guy is probably one of the most intelligent guys in the world. He's known for playing up to 10 games of chess at a time, blindfolded, and winning all 10. And that's how smart this guy is. And look what he says about evolution. He says, the Cambrian explosion is a mystery for evolutionists. In other words, they know nothing. They can't prove anything when it comes to the Cambrian explosion. Here's another one, John Ashton. And he's a professor of biomedical sciences. And he says the sudden appearance of fully formed species in the fossil record without apparent evolutionary ancestors and mutant intermediate species is a major problem for evolutionists. So in other words, when somebody says something about the fossil record proving evolution, you'll say, let's put down the Cambrian explosion. Where's all the transitional evidence? If you can't find any transitions there, what you're telling me is the whole foundation of the fossil record must be accepted by faith. So that's where the evolutionists want to get us, don't they? They want to tell us that we just have faith, that we don't have any facts. But the truth is, they have no facts. And so we want to get them to the point where they're admitting that they believe evolution by faith. It's no science because no one's been able to produce a transition done. So, let me just digress here for a minute. Somebody could ask you the same question, couldn't they? Why do you believe the Bible? How would you answer that? Okay, my answer would be, I believe the Bible because Jesus believed the Bible. Okay, Jesus rose from the dead, right? Do we have any observers of Jesus rising from the dead? Yes, we do. There were over 500 witnesses to his resurrection. So we have observable evidence. We also have scientific evidence to back up what the Bible says. Also, we always want to say that we believe by faith, don't we? Because what does Hebrews say? It's impossible to please God without faith. Right? So never be afraid to admit that you believe by faith. But we want to make the evolutionists admit that they do too. Okay, here's R.K. Barnes, another scientist, and he says, most of the animal phyla that are represented in the fossil record first appear fully formed in the Cambrian. The fossil record is therefore of no help with respect to the origin and early diversification of various animal phyla. So, what are you going to say when they say the fossil record supports evolution?
No.
Two things. It doesn't, does it? Why doesn't it? Okay, first of all, there's no transitional forms. And secondly, the Cambrian explosion. I can't find any transitional forms there. That's very low in the evolutionary scale. They need to be able to prove that they can find a transition between single-celled animals and complex animals.
Fossils we see the same as the animals we see today.
Right.
Same thing.
Living fossils. Exactly. Okay, there's one more area that we're going to look at with respect to fossils. And that's fossil graveyards. So there are these vast fossil graveyards found throughout the earth. Okay, we find them all over the place. And, well, how do you become a fossil? Let's talk about that first. How do you become a fossil? Now, some of you may have known something that acts like a fossil, right? You know. But how do you become a fossil? You have to be rapidly buried.
You have
so
to
that
die.
you have to die first, yes. You have to be rapidly buried in order to keep the scavengers away and keep the oxygen out, because oxygen causes you to decay, don't you? So what would that lead you to think? How would you have to be buried in order to become a fossil? Probably. By flood, right? Yeah. So we want to talk about fossil graveyards, and we want to see how creatures are all buried together who didn't live together, right? When we go back to that geological column, it shows, well, the first animal lived, and then the next animal, the next animal, the next animal. No, what that fossil record is showing is that is the order in which they were buried by the flood, right? First the sea creatures, and then some of the land animals that couldn't get away very fast. And then as we go up the scale, we find humans who were able to see the water coming and who were intelligent enough to know they had to get out of the way, and they just kept climbing up until they couldn't climb anymore, right? So that's what it shows us in that, really shows us in the geological column. So fossil graveyards. Here's one that's in Agate Springs, Nebraska. Has 9,000 animals. It's composed of rhinos, horses, camels, giant wild boars, birds, plants, trees, shellfish, and fish. Do these animals live together? No, they don't. They all come from all different environments, doesn't it? So this not only suggests a flood, it suggests a catastrophic flood that could have brought all these animals together and buried them. This is not a long, slow burial over millions of years, right? They don't just lay there and say, okay, cover me up, I'm a fossil. It has to be catastrophic. Here's another one in Como, West Wyoming. It's a dinosaur graveyard that's 7 miles long, 483 dinosaurs. Here's one, the Cleveland Lloyd Quarry in Utah, over 12,000 bones. At least 74 individual dinosaurs. Here's one in Alaska, the Siberia area. It's a graveyard of bears, wolf, fox, badgers, saber-toothed cats, jaguars, lynx, mammoth, mastodon, horses, camels, sheep, muskox, yak, ground sloth, and several rodents. Okay, do they all live together? No. Here's Dinosaur National Monument in Utah. Anybody ever been there? That's close, yeah. This is a fossil graveyard in Utah. It contains 1,500 individual bones from 11 different species of dinosaurs, including several complete skeletons. And yes, we do find dinos buried with other creatures, but do you know what the most common fossil is buried at Dinosaur Ridge? Any guesses? It's a clam. Okay. So how did clams get there? Had to be a catastrophic flood. And there's the Grand Canyon. And there are billions of straight-shelled chambered corals. They're found fossilized with other marine creatures. It's 7-foot thick layer of red wall limestone in the Grand Canyon. 7 foot thick and billions of nautiloids. Now, do you think they sprouted legs and walked a mile above sea level? No, it was a catastrophic flood, wasn't it? Plants is another example. Hundreds of thousands of marine creatures buried with amphibians and other types of animals. I'm not going to read the whole list to you. Here's Wyoming. Alligators, fish, birds, turtles, same thing. And here's an interesting one. In Chile, we have a graveyard that contains more than 75 ancient whales. And this was discovered recently in Chile. And most of them, a lot of them, are buried whole. So how do evolutionists explain this? Well, certainly not with long, slow processes. So what do they use as the explanation? Well, it must have been smaller local floods. Okay. Have you ever seen a small local flood that could bury 75 whales? No, not likely. So as I said, the fossil record is not a record of how life evolved, but how life was buried during the flood, how life died. Okay, so let's answer our big challenge. Does the fossil record prove that evolution is true? Yes or no? It's false. guys are really getting this. Okay, how about dinosaurs? How old are dinosaurs? Well, researchers have found carbon-14 and soft tissue in dinosaur bones. How many of you all heard about that, the research that's been going on? Kevin Anderson has been one of the big researchers over there. They've also found carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years. So if it has a half-life of 5,730 years, that means that those dinosaurs couldn't be more than about 80,000 years old, and they shouldn't have any carbon-14 in them, right? But they also found something else. They found soft tissue that's flexible, and it contains proteins, blood vessels, red blood cells, and DNA fragments. The half-life of DNA is actually 521 years. So if they can find DNA in the bones, what does that tell us about the age of the dinosaur? Probably not more than 8,000 years, right? So the common sense conclusion for the age of dinosaurs is that they are not millions of years old. Now, the evolutionists will try to come up with some rescuing devices here. I think one of them is, well, it must have been iron that linked in or something like that. I think right now the Creation Research Society is working on a project that debunks some of those claims.
It's interesting that the evolutionists are not doing anything
Right.
to demonstrate the iron can preserve that stuff.
Right. Okay, so we've reviewed 3 critical thinking questions. Let's just try them one more time. Number 1. How do you know it's true? Number 2. It's never been observed. And 3. Making assumptions. Okay, so it's really, and then we have a power question. What's our keywords in the power question? Observational and faith, right? Show me any evidence that would, the observational evidence that would cause me to believe that wouldn't be faith, all right? Okay, Steve and I can't get that one out. Good. Okay, so it's not really hard to refute evolution. We talked about fuzzy and magic words. The screens so you can see them. We talked about the Cambrian explosion and the fact that there were no transitions. We talked about the fossil record and how it actually shows a record of how animals died, not how they evolved. And we talked about dinosaurs being young. So it's not that hard to refute evolution. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You just have to learn the basics. But first you need to also learn God's word. And what does he tell us in Genesis 1:1? He says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right there, the beginning of time, space, and matter. So that's all you really need to know, isn't it? How long did it take God to create everything? 6 natural days, right. Are those literal days? Yes, you betcha, because he described it in Genesis 1:5, didn't he? He said that a day is made up of a morning and an evening. So he tells us it's a normal day. Okay, one more pop quiz. Actually, we've already done this one, so I'm not going to make you do it again. So, the main thing I want you to come out of here with is that we need to help our youth. They're being terribly brainwashed in our public school system. We need to help them become the influencers and not the casualties in the classroom, right? When they walk into that classroom, they should be the ones who have the answers and who can shape the discussion. So we have to prepare them. We have to educate them in their faith. We have to educate them in these critical thinking skills so that they go out and make an impact in the world for Christ. So that's within our power as Christian leaders, as parents, and as adults. And we're going to determine through our actions and whether we follow God's will, whether America continues on her current path and becomes a post-Christian nation, or whether she returns to her legacy as a nation under God. So we can make that difference with God's help. Okay, I just want to review probably the most important reason for believing a literal interpretation of creation. I just want to look at the timeline here. So, if we take a literal interpretation of Genesis 1, we find creation in 6 days, and at the end of it, God said it was very good, right? And when God says it's very good, it's perfect, right? And then what happened? We had Adam and Eve sin in the Garden of Eden. And as a result, we have death coming into the world. Romans 5:12 says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death was sin. And thus death spread to all men, because all men sinned. So it shows us that death is a direct result of sin, doesn't it? So now let's look at this from an evolutionist perspective. We have millions of years here in creation. And then we have Adam and Eve coming into the world, right? Because most evolutionists would say, well, at some point, apes became humans and God breathed life into them and all that stuff, okay? So we have Adam and Eve showing up. And then we have sin. But what's going on here during these millions of years?
Yes.
Death. Disease, suffering. Would God call that very good? No. So what do we have here? What effect does the fall have? No effect, right? This is why creation is so important. This is why it's so important to refute evolution. Because if evolution is true, if we allow it to influence our kids, what are we saying? We're saying there's no reason for Jesus to have to go to the cross. Think about that. If you think creation is a secondary doctrine, think about the effect of the gospel on the gospel. Okay? And let's remember 1 Peter 3:15. Sanctify the Lord in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear. And let's make sure we remember those last two words, meekness and fear. We also always want to do it respectfully. Okay, before I finish up, I just want to tell you about a couple things that we have coming up. In December, and this kind of goes along with the theme that we're building on tonight, is how to teach our kids about creation and how to debunk evolution. But Mike Riddle, if you know who he is, he worked for ICR for quite a while. He worked for Answers in Genesis, and then he broke off from Answers in Genesis because he felt his real mission was to train teachers and to create people who could teach creation apologetics. So he started Creation Training Initiative. And he's going to be in Denver Thursday through Saturday, December 3rd through 5th. And he's come up with a new series of classes, and this is the first class in the series. It's a 3-day class, and the topics include communications, skills workshops, there's instruction, there's practice, there's coaching. There's an examination of the goal and purpose of Christian education. He talks about teaching methods, concepts, and strategies workshop, and he's developing and how to develop and implement a fruitful Sunday school program. This is a 3-day class, plus you get his manual and you get all his slides from the class, and you can use them in any way that you like. The tuition for that 3-day class is $150. And he's only able to take 8 students total, and we have 4 of the slots filled. So if you think that you would be interested in this class, please contact me as soon as you can at info@denversocietyofcreation.org, and we'll get you included in that class. I think it's an excellent class. You can take it as a standalone class, or you can take it as the first class in a series of 8 that makes you a certified apologist or certified teacher. So there are, if you're interested, there are flyers on the back table back there, and you can certainly pick one up and just contact me. Okay, and then I just want to mention briefly our speaker next month at the Denver Society of Creation is Pat Roy. And Pat is the curator of the Creation Center at Mount St. Helens. And he has just some awesome speaking experiences, not only with the Mount St. Helens Creation Center, but he's been involved in the Awesome Science Media the information that they put out in the Jonathan Park series. And that'll be October 1st. It will be at Ascension Lutheran in Littleton, and that's at 7 o'clock p.m. And then I guess just one last thing, there's some literature also back on the table if you're interested. One is a little pamphlet that I wrote for our church convention last summer, and it gives you the basics of why we believe in creation. And on the back of it has our contact information if you need it. Okay, I think that about wraps it up for tonight. And again, I want to say thank you. And I hope that you're going home with some information that you can really use to make a difference for our kids. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow. Judy's had a really long day, I can tell you. She started off this morning, I don't think Marshall mentioned this. She started off this morning teaching the kids at the Lighthouse Seventh-day Adventist School, church school. And got a nice formal section over there. And then this afternoon at the Calvary University Academy, about 30 kids, I think it is, she taught there. And here she is tonight. So you're going to sleep well tonight. And I know. So it's been really exciting for our Judy to be out here. I wanted her to come out for a long time. And when I mentioned about the possibility of starting up and being our first speaker, she immediately right away said, yeah. So I appreciate you coming out. She will be around a while to ask any questions. And as of course, as we've mentioned before, as things in the back. I got something special that I want to mention to you. Judy talked a lot about evidence. She talked a lot about evolution. If you do not have this, this is not a book. It looks like a book. It's got pages, got a backline. This is a devotional. And every day there's something different. And there's wonderful photographs in here. And we got them for sale back there at $7 a piece. If you're not careful, I'll just put one in your hand anyhow. But get this in the hands of young people. Young people really, really enjoy this book. Also, I find that old people do. So, plus a few people in between, right? So anyway, get a hold of this. This is really good. And we've probably gone through about 50 or 60 of these now since we started this group. So there you go. And next month is Dr. Ed Holroyd. And I'll be here talking about the Grand Canyon. There's flyers in the back. So be sure and grab you some as you go out the door and hand them out to people. You'll find them. By the way, Judy, you've been posted on door fronts of a lot of different places now, these two towns, right at Fort Morgan, so you're pretty famous. Yeah. You're even at the sale one. That's the best place to be. So, okay, thank you for coming tonight. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this evening and all that we've learned. Thank you for Judy and her willingness to come out here, and for Jim, too, for faithful mule, as he calls himself. Thank you for Jim and the work that he does to support his wife and minister this time. So I pray for all of us as we go and depart, that we have a safe evening and good rest, and move on to what God has in store for you tomorrow. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. Thank you, Dave.